I'll presume it's for me. So I actually thank you, Scott, and I'll walk you through slides for the next 30 minutes. And one thing is that maybe I don't fully agree with Scott on the fact that, you know, we did a lot, but then maybe we didn't, in a way that still things are still moving. I believe we did a lot and we should be proud of a lot. And I'm gonna walk you through something that hopefully it's a bit of an inspirational 30 minutes, and then another inspirational 30 minutes at the end of everything when we look into the future. But now we look back 9 months, when we started all of these initiatives, and why did we did it like that, and in some cases we thought of it, in some cases this just ended up being like that. But for one, I'm quite proud of where we are right now, and I would like to share with you those thoughts. So I try to do a kind of a keynote format, so it's a bit more high level, as I really appreciate that they're not a room just full of engineers, but we have a mix, I think, and this quote kind of embodies why I believe that is. So if it's quite a techie code, I know. But if you look at cloud and serverless and all of those technologies that we normally use as engineers right now, and they are hip and they are new, they focus a lot on how do we build the same things, right? They focus on how do we build web applications or mobile applications and so on. Yes, we do them in a fancier and fancier way. Yes, now it's all about domain-driven design. Yes, it was about containers, now it's about serverless. But it's basically building the same thing in a different way. The reason why I believe there's so many business people in this room is because AI and machine learning is about building different things. And that's why it's so interesting and attractive in a way, because it's not the same web applications that we're building today. It's about building this uncertain future, and what can this technology enable us to build in the future. I think this is why it attracts people with different skill sets. And this is why I think when you talk about machine learning and AI, it's not just us geeks doing it, but there's a lot of a diverse crowd around it. And that's something that was also very interesting for me. 9 months ago, and I don't want to put Agron on the spot, but some of these things are also from some sort of a retrospective we had some time ago. And we actually had, when I was, in a way, joining this, and when we looked at it also from a business board point of view, or from different initiatives, we weren't really, the feedback that I got is that we weren't really moving fast enough. That we had some initiatives, some were okay, some were taking too long, some were fully externalized, and that was like a black box, and so on and so forth. But we didn't have, it didn't feel like AI in Haufe Group was moving at the speed that we wanted to move. There was a quote that I also got, is the missing data, and I think we always kind of, in a lot of our businesses, we felt like we needed the bread, but we got the breadcrumbs. So we always wanted to have, I mean, a lot of this machine learning stuff, it's all about the data and the data that you have. And it's not about automating processes. So depending on how we were really struggling in some of those initiatives in getting the data that we wanted in order to make progress. This was also, if you look at all the business reviews or the initiatives that we have, it was always a mix of, in a way, skills, data, and to some extent, I believe also wrong expectations. I remember talking to, and I have to be careful about the time, but I remember talking with joining a project, doesn't matter which one, and talking to the expectations I was already getting day one, and said, well, we already sold this thing. We told our customers that we're gonna be having, you know, this new component or this new product is gonna make their life significantly easier using AI, and we have 2 months to do it. And that doesn't work. for everybody that is in this field just a little bit knows that this is, you don't have a clear KPI, you don't know what you want to do, you just overhype estimations, and then you give a fixed deadline to run an experiment. And that just, it's a recipe for failure. So from a lot of situations that we looked at, we saw that there are different reasons why our experiments or our initiatives were always falling short. So then for the techie part of the room, there is, and also for the cell that is organizing this event, here it is, the TechRadar. So Haufe Group has a TechRadar when we look at different technologies, and we look at them in different stages. And if you look at where machine learning and AI, you can't see it, I have a different slide in a second, but if you look at machine learning and AI, we're moving past this discovery phase. So, and that means that we have to think about it in a different way. So in the discover phase, you want to have, and that's always true with new technologies, first you have to understand them. So then you do hackathons, you play with it, you do some experimenting with it, but at the end of the day, it stays in the sphere of it's an experiment or it's something that you want to try out to see if that's something that, first of all, you have to understand what does that mean, and second of all, you have to figure out what you do with it. When you move from that phase into the productize phase, then it means that you have to have business impact with that. You have to start creating a business or a business model or a product that incorporates that. And that's a very big leap. I think if we don't understand what does that mean and the kind of, that requires a different kind of an investment. We're not just playing around with AI, we have to show that there is customer value out of it. And I think the next slides, in a way, it's about what did we do? Because what we normally see, what we normally like to focus is here on top, right? The machine learning projects, and they should all work great, and we should all be ready, and we should do that fast and easy and have the magic coming out of it, flowing out of it. But actually, there's a lot of it which is below, which is the last 9 months, what we did was focusing on the lower part, not on the upper part, in fact. How do we get to a state that we could have sustainable innovation, and when we start those machine learning projects, we can actually be productive, or we can actually move at the speed that we need to move, or we actually have the data that we need to have. So a couple of months ago, I came with this awesome drawing, and we said, hey, we need to have something called AI Foundations. And AI Foundations is actually not looking at the top of the iceberg, but below, and looking at a few aspects of it. One is we have to find a different way of collecting and working with data, because also because of the way the Haufe Group is, we are not a single product company. We are a holding company that has different businesses, different data points that come from different directions. And the idea is that there is way more value in collecting those data points. In some cases, it doesn't. In some cases, it's enough what you have in the product. But in a lot of cases, it's all about collecting those different data silos together and allowing for a different view on what you actually want to do, machine learning or AI about. Another thing that we're facing, and actually everybody's facing, is upskilling. This is a hot new topic. We have a limited amount of data scientists. Data scientists are being seen as kind of miracle workers that can do everything, that can do pragmatic and deep dive, doing, I don't know, deploying containers, but also doing, I don't know, deep neural nets. And that's not really something that scales in terms of skill set. So, and it's extremely hard to find them, as with everything new and hyped. And so we needed to have a different approach on how do we get more people that are willing to look at this stuff. And the third one is enabling experimentation, and this is a big word, and I'm going to talk about it, but basically it's the fact that if these things are experiments, you have to have a frame around your product development, delivery, and so on that allows those experiments to happen. If you don't, you're going to be in a bubble, and you're never going to get the end user validation that you actually want. So, taking it one step at a time with a big word, democratize data. This is, as I said, I'm trying it to make more like a keynote speech. So, using big words. Democratizing data is making sure that the data that you have is available for everyone and the other way around. And there's a quote that I've been hearing more and more, but the number one things your ML teams will complain is the lack of data or data quality. There's even when you start a machine learning project, one of those, and that's something that Yuta tells me for years. That's fair enough. And I think she's the biggest, she echoes that the most. So, and that's true, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you're just applying machine learning or polynomial functions or this fancy deep neural net on your data. And if you don't have the data or the data points, you're not going to get magic out of it, right? And that's the other thing. And as I said, there's always reasons why you don't have it. There are always good reasons. But we have to fight against it. And there are everything from the world that we live in and GDPR and so on and so forth to the fact that it's somewhere on someone's computer that you cannot get. Or that something changed last week and you just have the zip file of 3 months ago. And that's, while that is maybe enough to start, it's not enough for this sustainable innovation and improvement that we need in the future. So it's not just, oh, I have a snapshot. It's about establishing a process that allows you to have new data points, new data sets constantly and scalably inside of Haufe Group, because what we want to do, we want to create an environment where it doesn't just work for the 3 people that are in that project, it works across the group. Because AI and machine learning, at least from a business statement, it's something that should influence us in a fundamental way throughout all of our products. So we said, let's build a data lake. So, new idea, nobody thought of it. And there's this, what we want to do, not just building the data lake, and that's something that Jersey and the data lake team will talk about later, so go to that session. But the way that we want to do it, and I think it's, yes, it's a cloud data lake for many reasons. We want to say it's a pragmatic data lake as well. We want to do something which is really fast, not have this kind of big infrastructure projects that kind of potentially last forever and nobody's using them and you have to use them. But that's kind of the idea, is we have one place where we have this mix of being easy, having the easiness of sending data to, having a small team that do the data cleansing, data governance, and data processing to a certain extent, and then allow different machine learning teams or data analyst teams and so on to have that data in a sustainable way. Not just snapshots, because we did it once, but as data pipelines, new word, that include newer data every single day or every single second, if that's what you need. And that allows us to have, let's say, the flow, not just the snapshot. The other thing is that it's very easy to create a new silo. It's very easy to say, now we have a team that owns all the data, hugging it, and so on. But the point is not to do that. The point is to allow this self-service data lake that allows all of you to access the data that you need. It is still a young project, let's put it like that, but I'm really hopeful that in the next months, if not weeks, we will have the first outcomes out of this. So we want to start vertically, enabling a few use cases and show that there is value out of doing all of this. Looks like this. I'm kidding, it's just some AWS services. But the point is that it's built on AWS, which is also a challenge, was a challenge in the beginning. Oh my God, you're going to put all of your data in the cloud. Yes, we will. The other, and I think the most visible investment that happened over the last months, is this upskilling of machine learning engineers. And I would like to spend a few minutes talking about it. But there is this interesting picture that I stole from someone else's presentation, which shows you kind of the 3 aspects of how do you upskill in general. And there is the theory part, and honestly, that is really important. And I give you a short story of this. I was at the AWS event, something, in January of last year. And we had a session with one of their top data scientists. And they presented all the PowerPoints and everything looked great. And then I said, well, I'm an engineer. I want to deep dive. I want to do something. Let's open SageMaker. You said SageMaker is the awesomest tool in the world. Let's open that. and let's do something. Let's do some text analysis. And I don't remember. It was LDA. It was something. I said, well, show me. I'll follow along. So he did. And I know Python. I'm not an expert in, but I know the language. So we opened the Python notebook. First line I didn't get. Okay, you never get everything, you know, I'm rusty. So go to the next line. I didn't get that either. And like the first 5 lines were all about creating synthetic data. And I was like, what's that? And then the other ones was, how can we do text analysis and you only have numbers here? Where's the text? So there was this feeling of being incompetent. That doesn't happen. That was the strongest incompetency feeling I had in my career. And I said, wow, that is really different. Because there was pretty much not a lot I could lean back on in my software engineering, except the courses that I did some time ago and so on and so forth. But it was really different. And that is something that every single one of us that doesn't do it maybe right now in university will go through. Because it's not like going from Java to JavaScript, and you just have to figure out that you just don't have classes anymore and deal with it, or types. But it's the fact that it's really hard to really understand what goes there unless you do this theory part. And there's the practice part of it. Obviously, the theory, reading about it or doing a Coursera course, it's good, but nevertheless, you have to experience that. We have to create a context when you experience what we actually want to go to. We want to go to this intuition part, because we don't need to understand everything. If the expectation is that we're going to have to understand every single thing that goes in there, it's going to be extremely hard, because we don't want to be, we're going to take years. But the technologies nowadays evolve to a certain phase where, if I ask you right now, do you know what's the most optimal way of doing sorting? You don't. But you rely on frameworks that you do the dot sort, and that's optimal. In the same way, machine learning moves to a little bit more and more commoditized in a way that you don't have to understand why every single algorithm actually, how does it do it, but you have to understand when you use it, what is it good for, and how do you optimize it. And it's very hard to get to that point unless you have the other two. So was, in a nutshell, what we try to do with the machine learning. And also, I give you 2 other slides. One is from Google, so that you don't see that I'm only giving you AWS slides. But it's this sweet spot of machine learning engineer, when it's not a researcher at university, but it's also not just someone who uses the API of Google Translate and says, wow, I did AI because I did .translate. Awesome. Although that's very good sometimes. And the same, if you look at the stack of AWS, you kind of have these extremes. The frameworks that a lot of you probably know, TensorFlow, PyTorch, and all of that. There's this Amazon SageMaker that tries to commoditize on more or less the infrastructure part of it, but you're still doing quite a lot of heavy lifting. And the last part of it is basically they create opinionated services about certain, so basically scalable machine learning models that can be used in certain cases. Poly does text-to-speech. Comprehend tries to do NLP and text analysis. So those things are basically AI in a box. But what we wanted to do, we wanted to focus our engineers here in this layer. So it's not expert data scientists, but it is still quite a lot that we need to upskill. With me so far. I would love to have some water now, but no worries. And so we did a partnership with AWS. I said we misused professional services. It was not a cheap initiative, because what we try to do, we try to say, we don't want a standard training. We want a custom training that uses our data and some of our ideas or use cases, but you build it for us like 80%, and then you build it with us. So thanks, Scott. Excellent. Then you build it with us. So, and then we also went quite broad and said, well, if you remember, some of you, I sent a mail to everybody in Haufe Group, as broad of an engineering list as I could find. Would be great to have at one time one list with all engineers, just saying, hint, hint. But, and I said, look, who wants to try it out? And actually, 40 people signed up. So that was, I said, wow, that's great. But we had to, in the end, kind of also for project reasons, for capacity reasons, we had to downsize it to 21 people. So now we have the 21, what do I have as the next slide? Yeah. We have 21 engineers that went to this training. I received already some of the feedback as one of the best things that we did so far in terms of upskilling our engineers, feedback coming both from AWS and from people from our company. It was really good. And I also see that community being created right now. I see, for example, new initiatives targeting that Teams group and just someone dropping an idea there and who wants to work on it and so on and so forth. Surely, we're talking about building this 20% of knowledge, not about creating experts, but just that 20% of knowledge is really important, especially for people who are not doing this every day. The other thing is that we didn't just do it for engineers. Sorry, I haven't. We actually had a workshop, or say we, part of the business part, had a workshop with AWS in Munich. The idea being we wanted to have a training also for the business side. It was, I think, hard to have a similar training for the business side. But we said we would rather, the guys from AWS said, why don't we have a workshop and we go through our process of how do we get from ideas to something a little bit more concrete when it comes to AI. And that was also, I got good feedback from that. So I was less involved in this, but I think 2 ideas that we have right now on the table come from that workshop. It was quite interesting. And the point is that we need both sides. As I said, productizing on AI is not just having this technology side of it, but also having this business side of it, this intuition, what you can do with it. Because that's when you move from learning how to walk into learning how to run. Because that's where you actually create something that no one has in the market. And maybe in the other half an hour I have at the end, we talk a little bit about how that happens in the future. And no big company ever started with, so Amazon didn't start with Amazon Go. Amazon started with building a recommending engine for books and then evolving that and growing and growing. So now they understand the technology at a deeper level, so they can start dreaming about those big things that nobody has ever thought of, right? I mean, walking out of a door with your bag full of groceries and you get the bill on your phone, right? I mean, that is amazing, but you have to understand first the technology to be able to make those leaps. Yeah. No. Back. This is what you're going to see in a second. So, cooperate. I'm just going to wait a couple of seconds. My screen is like this. So, good. So the last part is about enabling experimentation. And I think it's about one of the, it's actually, in my opinion, one of the most different, the things that we really need to change. I'm talking mainly now about using machine learning in products. There are many different use cases about how do you want machine learning and AI. You can use it in your processes, you can use it in various ways. But if you want to use it in your products, then you have to have this experimentation mindset in the way that you build your products, which is excellent. And the way that I try to explain it is that where we are with machine learning and AI, just ignore the dots. Right? With machine learning and AI and so on and so forth, we are in this peak of inflated expectations. There's a chart from Gartner about the technology hypes. And we, and especially maybe not we as engineers, but we as business, believe this will be the next thing, and it will be the magic, and it will be the thing that will change the way that we do products. And that's a huge pressure on the technology, not on us, but on the technology itself. And what we normally find is that we get very fast here when we roll it out, and then we figure out that it doesn't do what we thought it's going to do. So the longer you stay in that, the more you invest in this hype phase, the more you're going to be disappointed when you get the first iteration out. And the most dangerous part of it is that there is, at some point, there's this plateau of productivity when it kind of does what it should do. It's never what you hype about, but it's good. The longer you wait to move from one to the other, the less likely it's going to be that you're going to get the funding and the backing that you need to move on. So there is obviously a time aspect of it, and there's an investment aspect of it. So in a lot of cases, we tend to start with high expectations, long phases of invest until we get to kind of a first iteration. And then we probably never move out of it. So I don't know why I have that. Just enable experimentation, it says that. There's just a fact, and that certain things are just easier in the cloud. It's easier to do training in the cloud in a scalable way. It's easier to do that experimentation, or it's easier to do continuous delivery or deployments in the cloud. It's a fact. There is maybe going to be a DevOps meetup or event later on. We can deep dive into this. Just take it as given. But there's two kinds of iterations, and I think there's iterations in your product. You always talk about build, measure, learn, experimenting with A/B testing, and so on and so forth, deploying every week or every day, every sprint. But what you have to understand that the same paradigm applies to your model. You always want to retrain and retrain your model based on new data points, new data, new approaches, new stacks. And the reason is that the magic, and the reason why we don't want to have a centralized team doing this AI stuff, but we want to have a decentralized team that sits together with the product teams together and have those skills in there. It's because a lot of these machine learning things, it's again not about just the algorithms, it's about how do you create that product altogether. Maybe in some cases it's not about using k-means instead of, I don't know, word2vec. It's about it's about maybe designing a different onboarding process that allows you to add more data into that and use that to retrain the same kind of model, or do something which is called feature engineering. In some cases, it's way more important than just saying we're going to retrain that with more hidden layers, right? So there's a lot that it's at this edge between what a product team can do and how your product can change, and how that affects the data and the way that your model evolves. This is why I think, especially in the case of using AI in products, it has to be part of that product team. And it has to have this experimentation mindset across the complete product. And if you can only deploy to your customers every 6 months, that's not really going to work out. Because then that peak of expectation, or this, especially the value of disillusionment, will stay there for 6 months. And in those 6 months, a lot of people will lose interest. So the other thing is that find meaningful KPIs. KPIs like just use AI, it's going to be better. They're not KPIs. There's this, I think there's aspirational goals, and there's KPIs you can actually use for training and retraining. Let's make a difference of that. I understand that our customers are not interested in, for example, just give you an example that I have in my head right now, is in you want to use data from CVs to have at the end of the day better people in your company. That's an aspirational KPI, good. But what you want, if you want to iterate through your model, you want to have a KPI like, okay, can I can I spend less time searching through CVs? That is something which is achievable. The other one, probably has so many aspects in it. Oh, 5 minutes, awesome. That you will never be able to correlate it directly. So that is also important. You might have, from a business point of view, you might have these aspirational APIs, KPIs, sorry, APIs, Freudian slip. But in the day-to-day work, it has to be achievable for the team, and you have to show that progress, and you have to say it goes from 40% of less than random, right, kind of a recommender, to an 80% one on just making sure that I recommend better CVs. Awesome. And then we figure out what the next step is. There is this long word that gets longer, which is DevSecMLOps, which is about the skills that you need in a team. Sometimes it's the skills that we would like to have in a person. But the idea is that you want to have this team of combined skills, and all of them working together. What happens next? I think I'm staying with those 3 minutes now, probably. So what happens next is we have a few announcements before we talk about what happens next in the afternoon or at the end of the show. So I don't know what was the title of that. There was a title there in white. Yeah. But we're going to have, because we have such a good feedback on the first machine learning training, we decided to sponsor a second one. Looking at the people that applied in the first place and maybe still want to participate. And also looking at maybe other people, but we still need to contain it to something like 20 participants. And we would really like to do this end of spring in a similar format. And we also have a Microsoft that says, hey guys, don't forget about us. It came a little bit late to this party, to be honest. And they said they also would like to show what they have in their stack, which is technology-wise quite similar to AWS, but I think for some of us here, we would first of all like to see what Microsoft has, and second of all, maybe it fits more to if you're on Azure, maybe you want to stay on Azure, kind of a thing. So I think we will start with a half-a-day introduction, open to everyone. I guess I'm gonna send a similar kind of mail. Hey, who wants to participate to this? And we do it together with them on site. And if there's enough people interested in a follow-up, we do some follow-ups. They have a 4-step program, but honestly, it's quite similar to what AWS proposed. And I said, look, let's stick with one. But if someone is interested in that, again, we have a dual vendor strategy. I think part of our company is also very Microsoft affine. Maybe, for example, with Dominic, we get something together and we do something on the other stack. I also want to be honest and open, and if there is value and if we can do something, we should. We shouldn't just close our eyes and say these other guys came first, because it doesn't make sense. That's it. And not an inspirational quote, but just a pragmatic one. Let's take the next hours for you to deep dive and to figure out what we actually did. I'm very excited, and I think what we did is way more than what I put here, but was important for me to share with you that a lot of the stuff that you can't normally see. But if we go forward with machine learning and AI, and if you get more into the topic, my bet is that those things will impact you a lot. New people in the company that are willing and able to get into these topics, a new way of looking at data and collaborating on it. And the third one is this go-to-cloud mindset that I believe is one of the most fundamental things we need to do in order to be able to reach our expectations about our business. Thanks.